Welcome back to the Edexlive podcast by the New Indian Express, where we spotlight educators and changemakers shaping the future of learning. Today's guest is Shruti Kuruvilla, founder of Bach to Basics, a unique music education initiative that's rethinking how children experience music. From a career in banking to building a learning space rooted in joy, expression, and global sounds, Shruti's journey is one of passion and purpose. Her approach blends structure with freedom, helping young learners grow into thoughtful, expressive individuals through the power of sound. Welcome, Shruti. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it too. To begin, can you take us back to your own learning journey? Were there any early experiences or philosophies that shaped how you approach education today at Bach to Basics?
So, I've always said this. I feel like music is something that the learning happens in the womb. And although I don't come from a family of musicians or trained musicians, we've always been exposed to music in the house. So from a very young age, we were exposed to different genre of music, be it Beatles, be it Carnatic music. So, I think that's helped me and my brother. I want to talk of both of us when I speak about our early learning. It developed our interest in music, not to necessarily excel in it, but to kind of derive a stress buster or derive appreciation from it, which is what I my objective is today to bring to little children and adults. Try to bring that element of what music can give you, that pleasure, and sort of tap into that.
Absolutely. And a very important standard statistic is that students at Bach to Basics receive a 90% distinction rate at Trinity College London. Yet, you emphasize that it's not exam driven. So, how do you strike a balance between excellence and nurturing a genuine, joyful relationship with music?
So when I started off a Back to Basics, or when I started teaching, I was very clear. I spoke to my teacher and I said, what I want to do is I want to build a community for the music appreciation group. I kept it local, I kept it within Chennai. And while I did my exams as well and I went through the rigmarole of it, I did feel like sometimes at a certain point it kind of killed the joy of just appreciating the music. It made you very mechanical, it made you very regimented. And while that sometimes it does work, that rigor is important to have. After all, it's an art, it's important to have that sort of grit. I do feel like you need to strike a balance in enjoyment. So most of my students, since they're all one-on-one classes, we do try to figure out where we can strike that balance. So we have recitals, so it's more performance driven. We're not restricted to just classical music. We do look at pop, we look at anime, going back to Tamil and Bollywood music. In fact, the exam boards are also realizing that they're going to get more children to come and participate in their exams if they make it more relatable and likable. Because while classical music has its benefits, there are so many other music genres that are coming up and popping up that you cannot completely diss, and you can't be a Puritan about it. In fact, the exam boards themselves are kind of exploring pop and Disney. Some of the exam boards are even bringing in Indian music that you can play and perform. This is why I feel like you need to have it performance driven and find what works for you. And that's why I feel like a music school or music is for everyone. You don't have to be intrinsically talented in it. You will be if you're exposed to it from an early age, but it is for everyone.
Absolutely. And with all forms of art, there's always that inevitability of evolution that happens, and we have to get on that train. But there's also a lot of learning as well. Now, moving on to your music for mom, dad, and me, and early group lesson modules exposing children to diverse musical traditions, like you mentioned. Western classical, Hindustani, African drums. So, what's your philosophy behind this holistic exposure? And how do you see it shaping a child's creativity and cultural awareness?
So, music learning happens from very early on, and music is almost like a language. So, tapping into a new language early on, research also has found, like MIT In 2018, there was a study that says that language is best learned in the early years before the age of 10. So, music is something I feel that needs to be exposed to the child, not necessarily in a formal learning background, but just needs to be exposed. Now, all of us are not born with exposure to music. So, there are a lot of young moms and dads who want to expose their children to music but don't know how to go about it. So, these classes are basically keeping that in mind. It's more a class for the mom and dad to bond with the child with music and go back with a few, songs and few tips on how they can do this. And to even kind of orient them, like they say, like, hey, I'm not listening to baby music at home. What impact does that have on my child? I'm like, it has great impact if you're even listening to 80s music or 90s music and not necessarily listening to classical music. There's a rhythm tone. There are so many nuances that children pick up. So basically, the mom and dad classes were designed for parents who are a little clueless about how to go about this and to give them the reassurance that they don't necessarily have to be in a formal class. They can do it with little things at home as well.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, music is a very intimate experience. So your team includes formally trained musicians, many with impressive credentials, who also understand child psychology and dynamically tailor lessons for each learner. And take me to the process on how this really translates to essentially the student's learning experience.
When I do choose a team, I don't look at the credentials as far as the performances go, because not every great performer is a good teacher. So when we look at it, it's great to have that degree in music, but it's also very important to have a personable skill to enjoy. Primarily, most of our students are children, but we also have a couple of adults, but primarily have that element to understand what the student requires and how to tailor that class. Now, I can't say that everybody comes with that psychology, because most of my teachers are just fresh out of college. They're young, experiences are new. So I don't want to say that they come in with the right credentials. But what I do want to say is I put in a lot of effort in mentoring them and giving them a lot of feedback, sitting in on classes. And it's an ongoing process at Back to Basics, where it just doesn't stop at just giving them that first introduction. We're meeting once a month or every fortnight. If I'm requested to sit in on a class where, the student may be a little bit difficult and not in the beaten track, we always sit and we listen and we figure out how to make this work. Because, like I said, music is for everyone. And with that said, it is a learning process. It's still a learning process for me as well. So that's, I think, one of our biggest strengths is we don't come in here and we say, hey, we know it all. We come in here saying we're open for feedback, we're open to learn, and we're constantly learning, constantly changing. I think that's one of our biggest strengths.
Yes, and I think drawing on your point, is it a standout story you go back to often where you feel like, oh, wow, that person has taught me something as well?
Yeah, so classic example is I'll go back to early learning, and we had these classes for early learners, and there was a parent who came to me who suspected the child of being mildly autistic, but didn't have, so much so that the child would not communicate or say anything. This is something, I don't have any experience in teaching special needs children, but as I just said, the mantra that music is for every child, let them just come in. The classes we curate, students don't necessarily have to be participative in every exercise, even by just sitting there and observing, which is what I tell parents, which is that's what gets parents all worried about. Oh no, my child is not singing, my child is not participating. But what is important to note is observation, learning while observing is a very powerful tool. And if a child is able to sit still and observe, they can learn so much more and so much in a very different way. So that's what the child came into class in the beginning and was just sitting and just observing. And the mother also was very open. And then by the end of about 4 sessions, I mean, at home, the child didn't speak but sang for what he wanted. Okay, so he used music as his first way of expressing himself. And the child was not communicating, was not, speaking his first words. But then when he connected and used music, that's when I realized, the power of music. And she realized too. And she came up to me and she's, even to this day, she thanks me for that. But it was something that I learned myself. I just said, I'm just going to go with the flow and see where this goes. And I couldn't promise her that this is going to happen, but it did happen.
What a wonderful story, truly. And it's so lovely to see children embrace change and evolve into their potential. Most of your learning happens outside traditional classrooms at Back to Basics. So, when you're creating or choosing a learning space, even outdoors, what are the key elements you look for to make it truly engaging and interactive for the kids?
Early learners, they used to, I mean, when we first started off classes, they used to be out in my garden. We used to be one with the traffic, one with nature and things like that. Yes, it does make a big difference when you're out in the open. To be honest, the other classes are all in a studio, and it gets a bit more serious where you're focused. But the early learners, we do explore a lot of nature. In fact, what gets them going is the buzzing of the bees or a lion's roar or the croaking of a frog. All that is incorporated in our music, so we'll sing about it musically, and it's nice to see a bee buzzing around and a butterfly flitting around. So even the sounds that nature makes research has proven that even the buzzing of a bee or a chirping of a bird, it's all mathematical, it's all rhythmic. It's not a cacophony. There is some sort of a logic, a scientific logic behind it. That is not something that we can break it down and in a PhD format and tell our little children. But what happens is it intrinsically forms rhythm ideas in their head. So when they have a formal education and when they're open to it, then everything clicks because instinctively they figure the rhythm out. So, walking in nature especially is so important. Like, when you take a walk in the morning and you hear the birds chirping, inadvertently, you are instilling a certain rhythm in your head that helps you appreciate formal learning and music later on in life.
Absolutely. So it's basically being exposed to the ideas rather than just having the ideas in your head. You can see it happening around you and have that sense of reality. So, in an age of AI, of course, we have to talk about AI. How do you think we should introduce technology to students? Because, there's a lot of technologically driven instruments like VSTs, and a lot of people are using MIDIs, loop controllers. So, do you think that would curb a child's creativity, or rather, where would you draw the line between the two?
That's actually a very good question and very relevant in this day and age. And it's something that's boggling all of us, and we don't know what the right answer is. But point of the matter is AI is here to stay. There's no use in blacking it out and blocking it from your life. It's something that you need to sort of figure out how to use and how to get the right balance of using it, especially since now everybody has become a music maker because you can just take lyrics from somewhere and get it produced into music. So it's shocking because everyone has become a composer, everyone's become a music producer. With that said, all I want to say is when you learn an instrument and you learn what goes behind it, I feel like when you do come to AI and you do use extremely sophisticated software to manipulate your music, you do come with a better understanding when you are playing the instrument rather than manipulating it. And there is a certain feeling emotionally that's invoked when you learn to create something with your hands. So, yes, I feel like there is a balance that we have to figure out. You can't be regimented in terms of not allowing AI to come in. In fact, during COVID, I'll be honest, I had one of my kids who was interested in Simply Piano, which is an automated app that teaches you. And I found it quite innovative and it was like self correcting, and I let him play on it. But what he got out of it enhanced his formal learning in music rather than replace it. So, when you figure out, if now, for instance, if I said no Simply Piano at all, I'm sure he would have figured out a way to do it, use Simply Piano. And if I had said no, I would probably not have realized the benefits of Simply Piano because they do have a good system going on, the self correcting system and things like that. They have a very nice, sophisticated software, but I can't say that that would replace a proper teacher to teach you because bringing out emotions in music is something I don't feel AI has it right now to do that. So, but it is a bit scary for the arts on the turn that AI is taking. So, again, I will say I'm just learning how to maneuver and see where we could strike a balance.
In today's day and age, what kind of instruments are students interested in? Has it evolved from what we have seen before?
So, more than learning instruments, what students are doing is they're trying ways. Like, I have a student who is very proficient at the piano. So, what she does is she takes her software, she plays something on the piano, gets that recorded, then she's good at drums. So, basically, creating And even if they don't know the drums, they'll find a loop online that has the drums. So basically, creating a jam, a one woman band, is what they're doing. So they're exploring all the programs that are available where they're allowed to do that.
Absolutely. And I think that takes us back to the beginning of the conversation where we were speaking about, the evolution of music and the inevitability of it. So, my last question for you is, what would you like to say to the children of tomorrow if they're on the fence about studying music or including some form of creative expression in their lives?
I'm going to lead this question with an example from one of my students who learned with me from a very young age and now she's in college. The first thing that she came back and told me is she was one of my brightest students. But the one thing that she came back and told me and thanked me for, and it really touched my heart, is the fact that when you go out there into the big bad world, be it college, be it adulthood, there are so many things that are coming at you. And she said the one thing that kept her grounded was her music. It helped her cope with stress. When you do involve music in your life, there is no set rule. I know my brother grew up listening to heavy metal music. Today, he can sing a beautiful tune, although he listened to only heavy metal music. So it doesn't matter. I have so many students who have a formal training in Carnatic music, and that's something they enjoy. So I'm saying, be it any fold of music, don't let music be there in your life, even if it means just listening to music to calm down, listening to an instrument, learning to sing, even if you don't have the right voice, learning to sing, it's so fulfilling. It is a de stressor. Research has proven that it does de-stress you. It does help you cope with very stressful situations. It helps you calm down, and when you're calm, you make better decisions. So most of our bad decisions in life are made when we're heated and we're stressed. So it's kind of like a meditation, but it's enjoyable as well, and it's instinctively enjoyable. I do feel like it is something that needs to be an integral part of our life, be it learning an instrument, learning to sing, just listening to music, or maybe even just dancing to it. So it is something that is, it's scientific and it's spiritual. It has both. It's close to God or a higher being. It does take you there. It gives you a high in the purest of ways. So I would feel like, if you are on the fence about music and what you want to do with it, this itself, the fact that it's the biggest, and I think going forward, you may have AI, you may have this, but you don't have anything to help you with stress, right? So music is something that you can derive that elevation from.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here, Shruti. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Edexlive podcast by the New Indian Express. If this story should leave an inspired streak in you to think differently about education or music, don't forget to share this episode. For more stories from changemakers transforming learning across India, tune into edexlive.com/podcasts.